All right. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and just introduce you to our next speaker, Michelle Mata. I'm sorry, Michelle. Did I pronounce that right?
You did.
Okay, great. Michelle Mata, she's a senior leadership and team development specialist at Insight with a background in HR and training across healthcare, finance, education, and government. She holds master's degrees in education and business, and her work has contributed to multiple workplace awards for customer service and disability inclusion. Michelle, thank you so much for opening our event and being a part of AIDC 25. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and just hide myself from the screen and let you take over.
All right, sounds good. And I just want to double check. Are you able to see my screen?
I can see it. Yes, looks great.
All right, perfect. And welcome, everybody. Glad to be kicking off the conference. I am in San Antonio, so if any of y'all are in this area, you're going to hear me say y'all a lot because I am in Texas, but I'm in the middle of Central Texas, San Antonio-ish, and allergies are really prevalent. So if my voice gets groggy, please just give me grace. I did take my allergy medicine, but of course, nature's going to do what nature does. But definitely welcome for this session where we're going to be discussing accessible e-learning and more through universal design. So we'll be talking courses, slide decks, videos, and learning resources. Oh, hi from up the road on 35 then. And Charlotte, I am an Aggie. So whoop. All right, we got South Dakota. So a little bit about myself. I am the Senior Leadership and Team Development Specialist on the Culture Engagement team at Insight. I am also the current advisor and a former chair of Insightability, and that is our disability-focused teammate resource group here at Insight. So before we get too deep into what we're going to do, I also want to say happy Disability Pride Month. And a couple of other dates and things that you should be aware of is Global Accessibility Awareness Day. This happens the third Thursday every May. So definitely keep that on your radar for next year. In October, we'll be celebrating Disability Employment Awareness Month ending. And then on December 3rd will be International Day of Persons with Disabilities. So disability inclusion could be a couple of things, but at Insight, I did mention that we have our Insightability teammate resource group. And through the work that we've done, we've been able to help Insight reach the top score for the best place to work for disability inclusion, the Disability Equality Index in 2023 and in 2024. So we're really proud of that. And we also have a sibling group across the pond in our EMEA team, and that they're diverse ability. And then every quarter we meet together as a team for global ability. So that's what's happening within Insight, within organization, and why it's important to us to have disability inclusion, because we know here in North America, in EMEA, APAC, we have teammates of all abilities. So we want to make sure that they have ample ability to learn when we provide our courses and topics and materials. So some of the things we'll talk about today, we'll learn about the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and they are just guidelines, they're not law or anything like that. We'll identify situations where accessibility features can be beneficial to a greater number of learners, and then explore ways to create accessibility, right? Using features like focus order, alt text, closed captions, contrasting color, and those type of things. So before we get started, if you happen to have your phone or if you want to use a separate browser, if you would, go ahead and go to Slido, and you can either scan this with your QR code or you can go to slido.com and enter the code. But there's going to be a question that's coming up right now. And the question will be, what are the most common accessibility failures on websites? So if you have a chance to participate, go ahead and put your items on there. Let's see. So, okay, failures include contrast. Alt text is missing. Okay. Oh, big contrast on that one. So contrast for a lot of people. Area labels, not navigable by keyboard, captioning, heading alt text, PDF not being OCR. Okay, so we can see a number of things that are happening with regards to different types of failures on websites. So let's kind of see some of the most common ones. So let me hop back to my slides. All right. So some of the most common ones include low contrast text, missing alt text. So that's a big one, right? So let me go back to low contrast text. So when they did a survey of the top 1 million home pages, about 86% had low contrast text, about 66% had missing alt text, about 60% had empty links, about 54 had missing form input labels, about 29 had empty buttons, and 28 had missing document language. So we can see that this would definitely be a challenge for someone who was using screen readers or had low contrast challenges with vision, a number of different things. And I know that people approach disability identities different ways. Some people might say, like, I'm a disabled person or I'm a person with disability. You might hear me say it interchangeably both ways. I am somebody that has disabilities. I am also the parent of a child with disabilities as well. So we definitely live it every day in our home. So why is accessibility important? So we've got the WC3, right? Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So in the US, for those that are in the US, we've got Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So federal agencies, right, we need to have accessibility through there. But then for the ADA, Title II applies to state and local governments. And having worked at a state university, this is where a lot of my work kind of came to play. And then Title III applies to businesses open to the public. So in other areas, you might see in Canada, the Accessibility Standards Canada Act, and then the European Accessibility Act. And across the world, there's different laws, different regulations, but they all kind of go back to those WCAG guidelines, because that helps us be able to implement what we tend to see from across the board, across the world. So why is accessibility important? You guys identified it, right? Poor color contrast, lack of alt text, use of color alone, lack of captions. The forms might be inaccessible, or you might need a mouse, or it might be dependent on mouse-only navigation. And we know we have people that are accessing our devices and the computers and websites in many different ways. So we want to make sure that we're sensitive to that and we have options for that. And according to the CDC, 1 in 4 Americans has a disability. And Luis, how many do we have on this call right now? I can't, that screen is
Right
low
now
for
we
me.
have about 80 people are in. It's slowly just building up still, but registered we have almost 500.
Okay, so let's just, spitball. So, if you looked at it, like 125 people out of that 500 would have a disability hidden or known. And if some of you might be in a situation like me where I suspected I may have had ADHD and just recently was diagnosed for it. So there might be known disabilities, there might be unknown disabilities. So web content accessibility guidelines. So the goal of WCAG is to remove barrier access for all users, including those with disabilities and users of assistive technology. And let's kind of look at what this looks like. So WCAG uses the POUR principle. And what this means is, first, is it perceivable? Is the information and the user interface components, right, are they presentable in a way that the users can perceive? Right? Can we see it? Can we hear it? Those type of things. Next, is it operable? So the user interface components and navigation must be operable. So the interface cannot require an interaction that the user can perform. I know sometimes learning development pros get really attached to drag and drop, and drag and drop is really challenging for somebody who's like using only keyboard navigation only. And then next would be understandable. So is the information in the operation of the user interface, is it understandable? And then robust. So can the content be robust enough that it can be interpreted reliably by a variety of user agents, including assistive technology? So keep those POUR principles in mind. Oh, I'm going too fast, there we go. So the WCAG levels of conformance, level A would be the minimum level of accessibility, covering essential considerations for a broad range of users. And this addresses the most critical barriers users face when navigating a website. So the very ones that you all presented, right? The ones that we hit immediately and think, gosh, why can't I access this things? Let's see, is that just anyone who might be navigating? Ryan, I'm trying to understand that question just a little bit more. And then let's see. Level two, or sorry, level double A. This is kind of where most organizations try to aim for, right? The mid-range. And this includes all of the level A requirements plus additional instructions on how to fix those problems. And if you're kind of aiming for the gold standard, it's going to be a level AAA. And this is the highest level of conformance that provides accessibility for the widest range of users. And I can tell my slides kind of shifted a little bit. So, but we will work with that. So in terms of what is universal design, I'm going to go ahead and put the next question up. So if you would go back to your phone or your website and go back to Slido, and I'm going to put up the next question, which is, what universal design features have you used? So could they be curb cuts? Could they be lever door knobs, window blind or curtains in order to reduce glare? Are we using automatic doors? Maybe we're using wide sidewalks, public transportation, acoustic panels to soften sound. But if you found yourself using this either on a daily basis or a regular basis, yeah, please note that on here. Okay, so I see quite a few grab bars and handrails, definitely curb cuts, adjustable chairs. I'm on one myself. Automatic doors. Yep, flat panel switches. So instead of having to actually grab it, you can kind of just kind of bump it with your hand. Let's see. I see the window blinds or curtains. Yep, tasked or focused lighting, which is nice. Closed caption. So we see a number of universal design elements out in the world being used by a number of you all that are on the call right now. So let's take a look at what the curb cut effect is. Thank you all for sharing. So the curb cut effect, it's the idea that accessibility features are designed for a specific group that can benefit a wider population. So think about this curb cut. What groups of people benefit from curb cuts? If you would, just go ahead and put it in the chat. Oh, for sure, Sandy. Yeah, when I start looking at this, some of the universal design features, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that would be universal design. And if you're anything like me, I consider myself a lifelong learner, and some of this information changes for me daily, weekly, even monthly. Okay, bike strollers. Yep. Okay, so bikes can go through this easily. Individuals with strollers, anyone with a rolling bag. Yep, those rolling duffels or those rolling backpacks. Sight impaired, yep, because they would feel those bumps. Let's see. Someone injured, absolutely. I had a surgery where I had surgery on my foot and I was on a scooter for about a good month and a half. And these curb cuts were wonderful for me. Yeah, those with less leg movement ability. So yeah, that's the idea that we can have this one universal design concept, but it helps a range of people who may or may not have a disability, because what we're trying to do is increase access for all learners. So curb cuts and learning, here's what it looks like. So first we need to consider the type of diverse needs, right? Does somebody have a visual impairment, an auditory impairment, a motor impairment, or cognitive impairment? And in learning, right, we might have to accommodate for physical accessibility, digital accessibility, flexible learning methods, or even considering, right, universal design for learning, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then when we think about just typical universal design, right, which is what I quizzed you on, in a physical realm, it is those curb cuts, it's those automatic doors. In the digital area, it's captions and transcripts, it's keyboard navigation. Tools and services look like easy grip utensils and bump dots that help individuals, like for instance with Parkinson's. You might have icon and color contrast signage or voice control assistants. My son loves to use voice control assistants when he hasn't quite figured out how to master spelling a certain word. And then in education, it might look like multiple formats for content, adaptable assessments, or even just making the classroom space accessible. For learning, this might mean content presentation. So again, are we doing multiple formats for learning materials? Do we have alt text for images? Do we have transcripts and captions? For navigation and interaction, definitely making sure that keyboard navigation support is there, having a consistent layout and structure, and thinking about the way that websites work. We should be taking that into our e-learning design. Adjustable playback and speed, because some people might want to or might need to rehear information in order for it to process. And then progress tracking and flexible deadlines are also helpful. For assessment engagement, we might have untimed assessments. We want to provide clear and simple instructions. And then the gamification and interactive elements should be predictable as well. And then assistive technology compatibility looks like screen reader friendly design, speech to text options, and adjustable text size and spacing. So we're about to go into how to create accessible e-learning and really just learning overall. But before we do, let's go back to our polls. And before we jump into this, what accessibility features do you regularly include in your e-learning activities? So we're going to do a focus kind of like on e-learning for a second, but really we're looking at learning as a whole. Okay, so I see closed captions. Yeah, and at minimum, if you're putting a video out, it should have captions. See alt text. Okay, so closed caption being a big one. Let's see, image description, audio speed, transcript. Okay, so this is wonderful. So I see a lot of things already implemented that we're going to discuss. And there's going to be some of you on this call that are that are experts, probably even know this better than I do. But then there's also other individuals who might be looking at accessibility and inclusion for their group for the first time, or even might trying to find other resources to add it in there. And so let's look at this across the board. So let me go back to the presentation. All right. So when I first became aware of my learners needing different types of needs for learning, it was through one of my early jobs. And I had an individual come to me with a special request. And so what we had done when I worked in one of the health organizations I was with, we had set aside a particular room with 2 computers. And so that way those in the call center could reserve the area, go to that room, not have to worry about taking calls during their shift. So that way they can complete their compliance training without distractions. And so we had the 2 computers, we had headsets there, and that was the initial setup. But then I had an individual come to me and say, can I have speakers? And so we talked through it, and it turns out that she had hearing loss, and she was definitely concerned about losing hearing on the other ear if she wore headphones. So we accommodated her with speakers, and that worked out for her right then and there. And that was probably like one of the easiest accommodations I was able to make, especially early in my career when I wasn't quite sure what it meant to make sure that learning was inclusive or accessible for all. So you want to consider neuro-inclusive design. And when we think about that, our neurodivergent learners, again, known or unknown disabilities, we consider autism, dyslexia, ADHD, Down syndrome, sensory processing, among other disabilities and conditions. So we think about predictable language. I mentioned clear language and standard web operations. For instance, if we see something underlined on the page, we just assume it's a link if it's on any type of digital access. And we want to make things non-time based. So again, not having like strict timing on how long it takes somebody to complete a particular course. But we also want to be flexible with revisions. Those surveys are particularly helpful for me when I think I've gotten things just right. And then the surveys will come in and I learn something new. So that way I can go back and be able to make it more adaptive, inclusive for those individuals. So if we're looking at PowerPoints, generally a 24-point font is good for your PowerPoints. If you're presenting in larger rooms, you might consider 30 or 36 point. If you're looking at handouts or job aids, the minimum size font you want to be looking at is about 18-point font. And I tend to keep them the sans serif, so that way they're very clean when it presents the text. See, closed captions. Okay, so closed captions are typically accessible through a button, right? Usually see the CC, and usually white text on a black or dark background in 2 lines max. And these typically display for 2 to 4 seconds, yet it could be dependent on the speed of the speaker, the number of words displayed, the dialogue complexity, and the readability. And if you think about other types of media that displays subtitles or even closed captions, the BBC, their recommendation is that text should stay on the screen for 2 to 5 seconds. Netflix, they try to keep it on screen for 1 to 7 seconds. And so if you use tools like Camtasia, Storyline, Rise, you definitely want to include the closed captions as part of your process. So this was in Storyline, and you can see at the bottom, it's the white text on the black background. It's a little small on here, but you can adjust those within the eLearning tool. And then you see open captions. And open captions are similar to closed captions, yet they're always displayed on the screen. And some people describe them as burned in captions. And if you're using a platform where you can't put in the VTT file or things like that because it just doesn't have an area to be able to put those captions, this is a great option for that. And these are ideal for multiple languages, educational videos, long form content. I did have a fun video that I wanted to watch, but Louise had mentioned some of the challenges we were having with Zoom, and one of those is the audio that's happening. So I'm going to go and just show you the video, but bear with me because there won't be any audio, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what that looks like. This was a PSA from the city of New York. And so we'll watch it without the audio. And I could go down to here on the closed caption and turn on the closed captions. It would kind of stack on top of each other. But since these are automatically burned into this video already, I really don't have to turn on the closed captions because they're already timed for this particular video. All right, and I showed you the example of that. Camtasia is where I usually create a lot of my open captions. If I know the platform I'm using just doesn't have the capacity for open captions. Subtitles, these are similar to closed captions, yet usually display multiple languages, and they're ideal for educational videos or long form content. Yeah, let me go ahead and, you know what, let me jump back to that video real quick. That way you can watch it on your own. Let's see, share. Okay, there we go. Okay. And then at Insight, when we're creating subtitles for our learners, we got to consider North America. So we might have French Canadian and our North American content. In EMEA, we might be looking at Spanish, Italian, German, and then in APAC, we might be looking at simplified Chinese. Let's see, when am I electing to use open captions? It really depends on the platform. I tend to use open captions if I'm building in using Storyline or Rise or Camtasia. But again, if I just know that, like for instance, the video might be going on a website and I don't know if that website can support the closed captions, I wouldn't use the closed captions. I would go ahead and opt for open captions and just burn them into the bottom of the video. All right, so you might add a subtitle menu that looks like this. So, you have your accessibility tools, right? What can the learners expect that they're needing accessibility? But then in this case, we had displayed English, French, and German in this particular learning material. And the way that this is displayed on screen is on the left-hand side is the French, on the right-hand side is the German. They're both in the same spot, but early on in the course, when the learner selected which language they preferred, that will determine what's displayed. So you're using layers in Storyline in order to make sure that this happens, to make it accessible for learners who primary language may not be English. Now, audio descriptions, these are narrations that describe what's happening on screen in a video. And audio descriptions are a separate track that's inserted into the natural pauses of the dialogue. And you're seeing important visual details such as body language, expressions, movements. And it's not meant to overlap any of the material that might be in a TV show or might be in a movie. It's literally going to wait. It's going to talk, it's going to wait for a pause, insert what it needs to say, and then continue on with whatever the natural pacing was in that particular video or that particular movie. And again, I had another little fun video for that, but I'm going to go ahead and bring it up because I do want to share the link for this. How many of y'all knew that there was a audio description awards ceremony every year, and it was held by the American Council of the Blind? I didn't know this until I started looking at this, but I'm going to go and share this. If you scan through this, okay, there's going to be different movies and shows that have added audio description. And so I'm going to play this again without the sound because what you're going to see here is not only that captions were available, but you're also going to see that they provided ASL for those that are hearing impaired. And actually, let me go on closed captions on there. Okay, great. Okay, so I don't see the closed caption popping up in there, but let me speed through just a little bit so you can see the ASL part of it. And if you want to look at something really fun, scan a little further, find the one for Barbie, and there's audio description for the Ken dance, the I'm Just Ken. So definitely fun to look at. And again, you're going to find other videos online. There's examples of Lion King. There's examples of not necessarily Frozen, but there's a little video with Olaf in there. And so there's different audio description that you could use. Ryan, I have a cousin that graduated from there. So actually, I think she graduated last year or the year before. So yeah. Let's see. So alt text. Okay. So keep it short, usually 1 to 2 sentences. Don't want to overthink it. And you want to consider key elements of why you chose this image instead of describing every little thing detail. And there's no need to say like this is an image of or this is a picture of, but you do want to identify if it's a logo, an illustration, a painting, or a cartoon. And let me show you kind of what that looks like with some of Insight's logos and items in a second. And you don't want to duplicate that's adjacent in the document or the website in the alt text with the period, so that way the screen reader can pick up on when that phrase has ended. And then again, just overall consider the context of what you're presenting. And we want to present alt text for photographs, icons, illustrations, diagrams. And so for the Insight logo, I kept this pretty simple, and you could use GPT in order to get some of these alt text too. So in this case, it was a close-up of the Insight logo. And then in this case, I'm visually showing an image of the Insight headquarters at night. And so that's kind of what I stated in here. So Insight Enterprises HQ at night with the Arizona State, USA, and Insight flags raised. And if you have a diagram, I'm using this one for the growth model. And so I've described it as diagram of the growth zone model from smallest to largest circle, comfort, fear, learning, and growth zone. So that way, again, if somebody couldn't see it completely, they would be able to have an indication of how it's presented. For keyboard navigation, this tends to benefit individuals with disabilities, right? And then individuals who also prefer keyboard-only navigation. If you think about your teams that tend to code, they may take the mouse and just completely put it aside. And then it might also be with individuals limited or no mouse access. So they might have a condition that has paralyzed their ability to use traditional devices. So they might be using assistive technology in order to do their work. I could think of a teammate who in the past has mentioned that they're not even able to use the keyboard because sometimes they've got a skin condition that flares up. So again, things to keep in mind. In terms of screen reader compatibility, right, your users might be using JAWS, NVDA, VoiceOver, or Zoom text. And so when we're building that, think about just kind of the way we read, at least in the Western world, right? Left to right, top to bottom. And so that's the way things should be presented. And so again, we're considering, have we designed this in a way that's good for individuals who may have a motor impairment, visual impairment, cognitive impairment, or a physical impairment? So I'm going to show you an example in Storyline where I had created a slide and I wanted it to operate a certain way. So in this case, in this screen, what I wanted the screen reader to do, and even it's the focus order of the e-learning course on this particular slide, I wanted it to specify select a door, and then I needed it to go door 1, door 2, and door 3. So what this looks like on the back end in Storyline is I didn't use the default for focus order because it changes it up sometimes. It doesn't always get the order right. So I almost always use that custom focus order for Storyline. And so in this case, I added the alt text, select a door, and then I've got door 1, hunger, door 2, heart, door 3, harmony. And those words are reflective of Insight's values. So again, that hunger, heart, and harmony, part of our why for accessibility and inclusion. You can also use the accessibility assistant in PowerPoint to see if you have items that might need to be changed because they're hard to read or it doesn't have a title that's being read automatically. So you can use that accessibility assistant. And you'll find that in PowerPoint by going to your ribbon review and then towards the left-hand side, it'll say check accessibility. And then you can also do the reading order in PowerPoint as well. So I showed you this slide a little earlier, and in this case, it is in the order that it needs to present if somebody was using keyboard navigations and they were depending on the screen reader to display. Now, this is just a description, but I have alt text built into the slide. So in this case, it showed the header first, then the Insightability logo, then the first and the second disability and badges, and so on. So again, this is something that you can do in your e-learning tools. You can do it in PowerPoint. You also want to take them into your PDFs. So if you think about forms that you completed and the PDF kind of like bounces like boom, 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 it shouldn't be, well, you know, in star ways, it shouldn't be doing that. Again, left to right, top to bottom, in terms of how to fill out the form. And if you're creating a form, like a PDF form, you know, you want to make sure that the text is labeled, that the fields are labeled. So that way, if somebody's using that screen reader, they can identify what it is they're needing to complete or they're needing to enter. Now, as far as the screen reader compatibility, I recommend that these forms be created in Adobe Acrobat. It makes it simple, and they have the focus order too. But what I was going to say was sometimes we have a form that's not necessarily going to be read left to right, top to bottom. It might be left to right section, and then section 2, right, left to right, top to bottom. And so just section them out either naturally on how they're in their breaks or, you know, how it needs to be presented overall. And then the other thing that you may consider is that sometimes the font sizes get a little quirky on these PDFs. So on the back end, if we're mindful that if we want somebody to fill out a form, that we've given them enough space to be able to put that information so that way they could review the content of what they're presenting before they submit it. Sometimes we have those boxes and it has a little scroll bar. And so if somebody is trying to read all of it at once, it might be a little challenging to do that. And then the OCR, so optical character recognition. So I mentioned Acrobat because in order for the OCR to work, they need to be published to the PDF, right, in order to be able to be read by the text-to-speech tools. And if you think back, I can definitely think back to my college days where professors gave you like a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a PDF from a journal or a chapter of a book, right? A screen reader wouldn't be able to pick that up because it wouldn't be able to recognize the characters. So let's just be, concerned about how that looks with PDFs. In terms of contrasting colors, okay, so most common types of color blindness, and I'm going to do my best to pronounce these correctly, but the first one is due through analpia, and then that's the inability to perceive green light. Tritanalpia is the inability to perceive blue light, and protanalpia is the inability to perceive red light. So if we think about the instructions we present in learning, or even just even on a website, if we say press the red button or press the blue button, it could be challenging for somebody to see that color if we have not identified it in any other way. So we should use meaningful text, meaningful content in order to provide instructions. And so what does some of this color blindness look like? You can see it here in terms of the normal vision, the green blindness, the blue blindness, and the red blindness. And so where this really becomes helpful is using things like contrasting colors. And so my go-to is WebAIM for the color contrast checker. This is my best friend. I have a bookmark. I use it day in, day out. And so what it's doing is it's checking here is the foreground color contrasting enough with the background color. And so the ideal ratio is going to be 4.5 to 1. And what this means is that the foreground, right, in the background is 4.5 times greater. The foreground, yeah, is 4.5 times greater than the background. And when you're looking at WebAIM, large text is usually defined as 14 point. If you're using pixels, it's 18.66. And then for larger, it's usually 18 point or larger. Yes, I will provide links to all this. And in fact, what I've been doing, you can actually, I'm going to hover over this for just a second. So let's see. Okay, you won't be able to see it, but at least not yet. But what I've done on here is where I've identified the WebAIM color contrast checker with a QR code here. Even if you clicked the QR code, it'll take you to that particular website. Let's see. Oh, thank you for putting that in there. I appreciate it. Okay, so what I'm showing is an example where this particular color, it's one of our brand colors but for Insight, but this particular color would pass for AA WCAG for normal text. It would definitely pass for large text on AA and AAA levels. And then as far as being the graphical object and your interface components. So this is what you see when it's passing. When it's not passing, this is what you see. And sometimes, and it's really weird to me, there's been times where I thought like a strong white, even bold, would have had a bigger contrast on like a particular blue, and it turns out that black presented a bigger contrast. So it's really weird. You can't just kind of go off your eye. I tend to go back on here, and whenever I see something that just looks iffy, especially if I'm reviewing content that other people have presented, because we QA each other's work, I'll go back and say, what's the hex code for this? And that way I can put it in here and figure out, okay, is it just my eye that's not catching this, or is it really that there's not enough contrast? So at this point, let me go and take a few questions. And Louise, I know you've probably been monitoring the chat. So what are some of the top things that have come up on here?
Well, let's see. First, we do have a QA question, if it's okay, if
Sure.
we can go that. Jennifer Rivera is asking for the image description, how can we place it in a social media post that is a carousel type or a reel?
You know what? I'm still figuring that out myself. To be honest, I tend to avoid it. I try to use like a single picture if possible. And I wish I could say that I was absolutely great about including alt text on every single one of my social media posts.
Yeah.
But it's challenging. Um, LinkedIn does a good job of providing the room to be able to add that alt text. Um, Facebook, sometimes depending on what you're using in order to post, sometimes it allows you to put the alt text, sometimes it doesn't. So it also depends on what platform you're using.
Right. And let's see. Oh, wait, sorry, it just disappeared here. Sandy, it says, I've seen people just number the slides in the caption and provide alt text for each slide. And Nicole Etoile is saying, write the image text in the post or in the comments for carousels. Yeah, this one, that's a tough one.
Mhm.
I actually haven't, I feel like I've seen a good solution for it, but I can't recall exactly specifically what it was.
Yeah, if you look, if you search for like disability pride, disability awareness on LinkedIn, there are some advocates that are really fantastic about making sure that every single one of their posts um, has that descriptive text for all of their images. So I would highly recommend just kind of, peruse LinkedIn for that, because that's definitely a spot where I see it consistently for those that are in, I'm going to say, like stronger disability spaces.
Right, right. Okay, and so let's see, we do have some questions that are coming
Mhm.
in. Caitlin is asking if you're going to be sharing the slides and resources after the session.
Yes, I can definitely share it. I want to make sure that I go back and make sure that it's accessible, but yes, I can share it.
Excellent. All right. And if you want, I can place a link on, I'll have all of the recordings available on the AIDC website. So when you go back, if you have any handouts, I can link to them. So they'll be available there. Let's see. Charlotte is asking, how do I make sure keyboard navigation is available in Storyline?
Sure. So let me go back to that slide for a second. Let me see. I don't know that I had it up there. Okay. So in Storyline, you can barely see it. I'm so sorry, cut it off. But in the ribbon, there's going to be an option called focus order. And that focus order is what makes it possible in order to use that keyboard navigation. So you might have to play with it if you're using it for the first time, but that's definitely going to be what you want to use. When it brings it up initially, depending on how complex or how your storyline file, and this even works for, oh my gosh, I'm losing words right here. Um, Captivate, there you go. This works for Captivate too. So when you bring this up for the first time, it might have like descriptive pictures noted on there. It might have rectangle number 2, oval 3, square 5. And so you might have to go back to your um, your timeline and start to name your components. So that way, when you get into this focus order, you know exactly what it is that you're looking at. So in this case, right, I know what it's named on my timeline. So when I come here, I'm not having to guess as hard what the alt text needs to be because I know what it is that I'm trying to do with this particular slide. So I tend to be pretty meticulous when it comes to labeling my elements in Storyline in order to make the QA process for accessibility and even just triggers as a whole much easier. So I hope that helps.
Nice. Okay. Let's see. And here, actually, let me go back to this one from Adrienne Guerrero. Can you speak a bit about longer alt text over 150 characters and accommodating for that with an option for users to access a longer description in an accessible way?
Sure. Um, so I'm trying to think about a use case where I've done that for our TRG, right? And you might call them ERGs at your employer, but for our TRG, I created kind of like a commercial video to describe who we are, and it was in the form of pictures and it had music playing over it. But then what I did, because I knew that I needed to be able to describe visually what was happening for our teammates who might have low vision or vision loss, I created an entire script based on where the timing was in the video. And that was definitely longer than 150 characters, but it was enough to take a 30-second visual video that didn't have any spoken word, but be able to describe accurately what was happening on the screen in each of the pictures or the videos that we displayed. I think about another challenge that I had in Rise where you might take a diagram or a model and you might embed it. And so it might be really difficult. Like if you think about a graphic that has embedded text in it, your screen readers are not going to pick that up. So you need to figure out how to craft it in a way that allows that. So what I tend to do is if I'm using something that has that embedded text, I make sure that the alt text has that information. There's also times where I've used in Rise, they've got those kind of like forget what they call it because I've not used it in some time. But you can kind of get pointed in where certain things are on a particular image. And so I would add the description there. And so it might be like a micro piece of the diagram here and a micro piece of the diagram there.
Okay. Let's see. And it looks like there is another one. Oh, okay. So that was actually in the QA as well. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that. How do you usually test when you're doing, I mean, I'm sorry if you went through it um in your slides, but when you're testing your alt text, like what is typically your workflow for that?
Um, Putting it in and literally going through keyboard navigation, then just
Mhm.
kind of hover to see, did it display? Is it showing? I wish I could say that I actually had like, actual users that could test this day in and day out, but like each of your workplaces, we're really busy, and those that probably would be the most critical users, right, of those particular pieces might be just as busy as I am
Right.
in their department, and so it might be challenging to get like actual use cases, or rather user accessibility testing for particular things. And so if we've gone through it once and we know that it's been a success, we tend to replicate that particular process again, um, and hope that it's still, relevant, still working. And if not, we definitely want to hear about it. So that way we can make the changes that we need to make.
Very nice.
Mhm.
Interesting comment here from Bobby who's saying, did anyone see the announcement for Molly Burke's book? She's an influencer who's blind and talks about all of the accommodations used in making her book a reality. Her publisher said they learned so much and are embracing the protocols Molly used or demanded in the design and publishing of her book. That would be very interesting to see. Nice,
Yeah.
Bobby. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Let me take a look. I am not seeing anything else. Um, Gosh, Michelle, this has been great. What a great way to start the event. You had so much information. I'm sure this was really warming everybody up to, to the next couple weeks. I just want to throw in there, there isn't going to be any events on Thursday or Friday because I'm going to be out of town, but then coming back the following week, and I'm still have a couple speakers that I think I'm going to be adding to the event as well. So, just keep an eye on the schedule.
Sure.
Michelle,
Well,
is there anything else that you'd like to add?
yeah, let me just add a couple different additional resources that you can look at. So things you want to do, create your own accessibility checklist for the work that you do. Again, look at the captions, consider subtitles, audio descriptions if you need it, the alt text, the keyword navigation, and contrasting colors, right? Kind of keep those top of mind. Accessibility checkers, utilize your learning management system, your e-learning authoring tools, or your video production tools, whatever tools you might be using. Actual accessibility checkers that you could use include Microsoft's Ability Checker, Wave, Axe, and Totally. And some of the screens look like this. Just be mindful, just like AI, right? Especially GPT. If you put it in here and it's proprietary, you've launched it into cyberspace. So just be really mindful of what you share.
Mhm.
A book that you can check out, Upskill, Reskill, and Thrive, Optimizing Learning and Development in the Workplace. So James McKenna does do a high level focus, or rather a strong focus on universal design for learning in the workplace. So this is going to be a great book to check out. Another one that came out recently and her book group just ended, I think it was last week, Design for All Learners, Create Accessible and Inclusive Learning Experiences. So Sarah Mercer was the editor for that. And this offers a guidebook for talent development professionals to create learning experiences that are accessible to and inclusive of all people. If you're looking for particular learning opportunities, you can go to the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. They have certifications you could look into if you want to go deeper down the rabbit hole for that. And I would also recommend connecting with Disability In. I consider this kind of like the Chamber of Commerce, if you would, for those that are in the commercial disability space. So we are partners with Disability In at Insight, and so definitely recommend connecting with them. And so I am at the end of my presentation. So I'll stick on for any last minute questions
I do
that are
have
on
one
here.
actually. Michelle Ryan threw this one in,
Yeah.
and it's I think it's a good one. How have your interactions with the AI interface resulted in accessible learning? Have you noticed a heavy workload in reconfiguring AI results
Um,
to an accommodate? I'm sorry, I don't know what to accommodate reality. Sorry, I'm not quite sure what that is, but
uh, well, so when it comes to AI, I don't see AI kind of like changing a lot of what I do other than making it quicker at what I do. In terms of like QA and things like that, or even just kind of brainstorming outlines for how I want to proceed with a particular course. Because I still have to bring it in, I still have to QA it, I still have to, edit it or wordsmith it or whatever it might be. So now I have used AI voices, and that can be quirky because sometimes things might not be pronounced correctly. So you have to get really creative with the phonetics there. And then I've also used, and that was with like 11 Labs and Beyond. And then with AI video, I was using Synthesia, and I think that's how you pronounce it. And sometimes you have to kind of work through the glitches, right, of what's happening with the AI presenter. There was one AI video platform that we reviewed. I think HeyGen was one of them, and I can't remember the last one. I honestly don't remember which platform it was, but I remember when we were looking at the videos, I got distracted every time I saw the presenter do this, like every 6 to 8 seconds. And this was just the AI. So I knew, like, if I'm catching that, I know that's probably going to be distracting for somebody else. So just be careful with your tools. Be mindful of how they're going to be perceived, how the voice is going to transfer to those that are going to be reviewing or even learning from that information.
excellent. There's a couple great comments in chat. Let's see, like Caitlin's saying, I feed stuff through ChatGPT and ask it how I can make it more accessible and inclusive, and it's
Mhm,
been awesome. And Karen is saying, I found that AI doesn't lessen the work, but it's good for checking the structure and output of a theory or practice.
mhm.
It's and Sarah, shout out to Sarah who's in the who's in the session, posted a great AI powered tool for
Awesome.
creating AD videos. Thanks for
Yeah.
being here, Sarah.
And internally, at Insight, we have our own Insight GPT, but then we also use Copilot extensively.
Excellent. Very nice.
Yeah.
All right. Sarah
But
just
I know
posted.
we're at the top of the
Yeah.
hour, so I definitely want to say thank you to everybody who joined us on this webinar. I appreciate it, Luis. I appreciate the opportunity to share the information.
Thank you for being here, Michelle. And thanks everyone for attending and having such a great chat. We learned so much from everybody that participates in the chat. And Rajmi, I just want to add, Thursday and Friday are not canceled. I just didn't book anything those days. I have a memorial to go to, so I couldn't do those days. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and just end the session. Kara North is going to be here at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. So please join us for that, which is going to be happening in about an hour. And yeah, with that, thanks everyone.
All right. Take care, everyone.